Glad to have you back any day on such a beautiful day, but especially glad here on this Alumni Day for this Hall of Fame induction. I trust everyone's going to enjoy this ceremony, inductees, friends and families, teammates, classmates, for all the usual reasons. There's a special personal honor involved in this today and some delight catching up with folks you haven't seen for a while. And the women, the team just all wouldn't get up front because they had to keep talking, and that's great. There's going to be some delight in recalling great accomplishments. There's even going to be a little head bobbing championship type. Yeah, I remember that. That goal, that match, that race, that one inning. Each individual team here today will enjoy a bit of that glory days memories, and these are some of the usual reasons. Some of the other usual reasons for enjoying this are woven into the preparation, the grit, the risk, the performance, the outcome of our sport, but are not the sport itself. The deep affection that we all develop with teammates and friends and coaches, toiling together not merely in our sport, but in our Peddie lives. Those rich relationships are recalled, rekindled a bit, and part of the deep and usual reasons that you will enjoy today. But I ask you to, having seen the ceremony before, I invite you to enjoy this in a way that you may not have anticipated beforehand. Please listen hard to the stories of all the other inductees and add theirs to your experience today with that special, empathetic way that athletes can understand athletes of other sports. This may be all about you today, but the you is not singular, the you is plural. Remember that all of us here today who are honoring everyone else from different decades, different genders, different sports, we're all here because all of you in the room were at once upon a time Peddie kids playing games at school with your friends. And there's a whole bunch of you. Couple nuts and bolts things. After Mr. Green talks, we'll have the presenters come up and introduce their inductee. And if the inductees then come up right up in here, we'll stop for a second, don't run away. After you made your comments, we'll take a picture. And then we'll keep doing that as we continue on. And then when we're all done, we want to have pictures over on this side of everyone, all the inductees. And there's some group shots there, and that's a good time for other people to get photographs if you'd like. We're going to do this in reverse order because all of the women here is going to be a little hard to manage if they're early, so we're going to go in another order. So I'd like to, just as a heads up there, Mr. Green. He's the head of the school. He's the guy.
I probably ought to put a shameless plug in too, but it would cost you a lot more. Just kidding. It's my pleasure to open our Peddie Sports Hall of Fame ceremony and welcome you to the Annenberg Library in Annenberg Hall, or for those of you who graduated before 1993, Memorial Hall, in honor of Peddie graduates who served their country in World War I. We gather to recognize and honor Peddie athletes and Peddie teams whose achievements were of the highest caliber and who through their example and success inspired other athletes and teams to even greater heights. We gather in celebration of excellence, of accomplishments, of contributions, and of memories rekindled. That we're now celebrating the accomplishments of 3 legendary athletes and legendary teams in the library is, I think, appropriate. Here we can honor our inductees and their achievements, but also contemplate the importance of both academic and athletic excellence and the relationship between the two. Over my shoulder, you can enjoy the magnificent view of our playing fields and our E&H Graham Athletic Center and contemplate their importance in the lives of future Peddie students. Blessed with a strong tradition, Peddie believes that participation in interscholastic athletics and physical fitness activities is part of a holistic educational experience that prepares students for college and for life. We also boast of countless accomplished student athletes, many of whom you can identify in your program, and some of whom we honor today. Therefore, Peddie makes every effort to provide our teachers with the resources necessary to inculcate in their students those particular values that are best learned in pursuit of individual and collective excellence on a playing field, in a swimming pool, or on a wrestling mat, through competition. Values such as sportsmanship, discipline, perseverance, and collaboration, to name just a few. To that end, we are constantly upgrading our athletic classrooms. Our new all-weather turf field opened in September of '09. Our aquatic center in January of '10. Our fitness center in what was formerly known as our Sprout swimming pool opened in September of 2010. And if you look over my shoulder to your left, you'll note that we are currently resurfacing the Lawson track and rebuilding the bleachers adjacent to the Schumann football field. I hope you'll have a couple of moments to look around today. These initiatives teach young men and women during their high school years the importance of a healthy lifestyle and the necessity of maintaining that as they age. That is why we refer to our facilities as our extended classrooms. So important are they to the balance our students will need in their lives. Our coaches also represent this sense of balance, primarily faculty members. They juggle teaching and family duties while serving as coaches, providing the same level of enthusiasm on the field as they do their subject matter in the classroom. What an extraordinary opportunity for a young person to be surrounded by role models, all of whom encourage Peddie athletes to develop their considerable talents in the pool, and on the courts, on the field, and on the track. As I mentioned every year, Walter C. Black, Peddie alumnus, class of 1886, wrote over 115 years ago. Let your athletics teach morality, honesty, and fair dealing, and give health, strength, and enthusiasm. Let your books direct the mind in its proper channels and develop it, and the true spirit of love and honor will ever pervade the lives of those of you sent out in the world to do its work. Our honorees took full advantage of their opportunities in our extended classrooms with our coaches. Starred on our teams, generated pride and spirit in our community, and learned those lessons outlined by Mr. Black that undoubtedly prepared them for the rigors of life and leadership. I thank them for their example and for their legacy. And without further ado, I want to introduce our director of the Sports Hall of Fame, Barbara Groot, who will toast the memory of Skip Maslin, class of 1949, who founded the hall in 1987 and sadly passed away last August.
Thanks, John. Unfortunately, the Maslin family couldn't be here today. They have another family function. They kept them away, but they are aware of the tribute happening. So I'll just say a few words, most of which is in your program, but it's worth reading about, I think, as well. The Peddie Sports Hall of Fame lost its friend and founder, Edward Skip Maslin, on August 30th, 2011. He was 82. A multi-sport athlete during his Peddie years, Skip played center field in baseball, was captain of the squash team, and held his own at right halfback on the football team, where at 5'8" and 156 pounds, he was referred to as a shifty little ball carrier and a consistent ground gainer. There's some great pictures of him in the back of your program. Elected president of his senior class, Skip also was active in Gold Key, the Glee Club, and the choir. Among his many honors, he received the Outstanding Alumnus Award in 1989. Nearly 25 years ago, Skip hatched the idea that Peddie should have a Sports Hall of Fame. The charter members were selected in 1986, and the first hall class was inducted during halftime of the Blair Day football game in the fall of 1987. The Sports Hall of Fame recognizes those who have made a significant contribution to athletics while at Peddie, students, teams, coaches, and other members of the community whose contributions and achievements have improved Peddie's reputation, brought credit to the school, or inspired others to their own personal level of excellence are also honored. Skip personified all of these. Serving as a member of the school's Board of Trustees for nearly 3 decades, Skip was honored with the title of Trustee Emeritus in 2003. Maslin roots run deep at Peddie. His son Al Maslin, 74, and 2 granddaughters, Christina Brown, 09, and Sarah Maslin Fowlery, 03, with whom many of you were classmates, graduated from Skip's beloved steady old Peddie. Always a generous supporter of the school, there are 2 rooms on campus named after Skip, the Maslin Room in the Student Center and the Edward Skip Maslin 49 classroom in the Casperson History House. One of Skip's oft-repeated mottos comes from Mark Twain: "I never let schooling get in the way of my education." Somehow, though, it seems he found the right balance. Peddie's grateful to Skip for making the Sports Hall of Fame a reality. Thank you very much.
Got a veteran ice hockey team that will be inducted here by Mr. Bob Zink. Bob, would you come up? Do the honors on the hockey.
It is my pleasure to introduce the 1941 and 1942 ice hockey teams. In your program is a well-written and thorough report that covers the skaters and their expertise and details of their winnings. I see no reason to read this to you now because I'm sure that some of you have already read it. What I will do, however, is to fill you in with some facts that are not in the report, and also the results of my telephone calls to the 3 1942 members that we contacted. There was no hockey played until the weather turned cold and the Peddie Lake eventually froze. When the ice was thick enough to be safe, a hockey rink was outlined with boards and the goals were put in place. Now the Peddie team could practice and get ready for their first game. Surely you can visualize the team shoveling snow off the playing area before they could practice, or the problems they had when it rained or got too warm. It is easy to wonder how the teams played so well. They were well coached and had a winning spirit. The scheduled games were played at Princeton University, and the Peddie players were transported to Princeton in the cars of the teachers and home again after the game to a campus that hardly knew they had left. I was a Peddie student for 4 years and only remember hearing talk about an important hockey game more than once. Yet I know a number of the players well. I knew a number of the players well. As a matter of fact, Bill Hawley, the coach, was my hallmaster. I talked with George Bickford, 1942 team. He was he was a one-year student. He enjoyed the hockey program and went on to play at Syracuse. He now lives in northern Vermont and likes winter sports. He is also a golfer. He was pleased that the hockey program was being honored. I talked to Ray Perry, 1942 team. He was quite pleased that the 2 hockey teams were being honored. He mentioned a number of the players by name and how important they were for the wins. Ray went to Dartmouth, played hockey, and one of his hockey team members at Peddie went up to, or played against Dartmouth, so he thought that was great, but he couldn't remember the fellow's name. Ray lives on a golf course, Bend Pine in Vero Beach, Florida. Frank Bradley was the third 42 team member I spoke with. He said he was going to try to be here today, but I talked to him the other day and he said it just can't work out. And Frank, after he left Peddie, went to Cornell, where he distinguished himself not as a hockey player, but as a football player, and was inducted into the Peddie Hall of Fame a number of years ago. Frank told a story about Hank Safarik, who played on both of these teams. Hank went to Princeton and, of course, played varsity hockey. He was so good that a semi-pro team in the area heard about him and asked him to play for them whenever he could. Of course, the word got out about what was happening, and that wound up Hank's amateur career. It has been a pleasure for me to make this report and to induct the 1941-42 hockey teams into Peddie's Sports Hall of Fame. And I might like to add that sitting on the front row here are John Sprout and Tony Kolb, who are both, I think, members of 42. Yeah, I got a nod, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zanker. To introduce John Speck, I'd like to call up Don Duffy, former Peddie teacher and coach who's come up here from St. Andrew's School. We haven't been back in a while, right? But we're glad to have you here. Don Duffy.
It's been 17 years. Well, in order to fully appreciate what John has done, I have to give a very quick, brief description of his coach, and you can see just how very special John's accomplishments were. In order for you to truly understand how John Speck was able to accomplish so much when I was here at Peddie, I have to give a very brief description of his coach, his head coach, who gave him the tools that he needed to reach his goals. The Peddie wrestling team in the 1980s and 1990s, led by head wrestling coach Keith Holcomb, was the most ornery, intimidating group that you could ever come across. The workouts at Hawks, as he was referred to by his wrestlers and John, were way ahead of the curve when it came to technique, mat tactics, and training methods. He was a master of every aspect of wrestling, from conditioning to teaching his horses the mental aspect of the sport. He knew how to recruit talented athletes, and year after year he figured out ways to convince them how to just do absurdly ridiculous things as they trained in that tension-filled, intimidating, and scary room over there in the field house. If you have ever had the experience of visiting the wrestling room during the practice back then, you would have thought, where did these crazed lunatics on steroids come from? Anybody who has ever been involved with wrestling knows, though, that it is a tough sport for tough people, Holcomb's words, and that there is only one speed, full throttle the whole time. But what was really, truly inspiring about being in that Peddie wrestling room day after day was that John Speck and his teammates learned about being held accountable for the things you say and follow up on them. It was all about just shutting up and doing what you have to do when you have to do it. Don't give me excuses, just get the job done. And John Speck was one of Hawks' horses. I can still remember meeting John for the first time when he showed up as the new freshman on the squad for preseason in the early fall. Unlike most of his teammates, I don't want to get anybody mad here, but unlike most of his teammates, Speck was actually a nice guy. He showed up that first day straight out of Maryland with his goofy smile and his notepad under his arm. I remember the other assistant coach, Sid Holcomb, Keith's brother, looking at me and laughing, man, is this kid in for a rude awakening. But I have to say, after that first full practice, being ridden physically and mentally thrashed by his older teammates for 2 hours, John left that first practice with that happy-go-lucky, goofy smile still on his face, and when he graduated 4 years later in 1992, he was still the gentle kid who was now a scholar athlete, finishing up in the top third of his class academically, having performed on stage with the Peddie Singers. He was a 2-time Mercer County champ, a 3-time state prep school champion back in the day when there was still a lot of teams in that tournament, and it still actually really meant something. As a sophomore, he went into the national prep tournament, undefeated with 40 consecutive wins under his belt, before finally taking second place. He was a 3-time runner-up at that tournament, and in his senior year, he was a national prep champion. I watched that little freshman with the goofy smile come into the wrestling room with his little notebook under his arm. He was writing stuff down. He had focus. He was setting goals for himself, and he was writing down the objectives on how to reach those goals. I know I'm confined to a short time, so I'll just tell one quick John Speck story. I wish I had time to talk about when our headmaster, Tom McGray, was in the wrong place at the wrong time at the Mercer County Wrestling Tournament at Trenton High in John's junior year when a riot broke out amongst the parents all around him, and he fell down and disappeared under a sea of bodies of a mob of angry parents who erupted into a riot, and the police had to get involved. We all thought Mr. DeGray was toast under that pile of carcasses. At the semifinals of the National Prep Tournament, John was wrestling a talented kid, and he was really putting the pressure on his opponent, and he threw the legs in. Anybody who has ever wrestled knows how tough it is to get out of legs. I remember John beating the boy pretty badly. At the end of the match, the boy's mom came running over to our corner, and she accused John of being a dirty wrestler and a poor sport. Anybody who gets to know John Speck would realize that the mom's accusations couldn't have been further from the truth. Of course, John was mortified because that wasn't him at all. Coach Holcomb, and you might find this surprising, Coach Holcomb very politely stepped in and defended John by explaining that his wrestling was totally playing by the rules and that the cross-body ride was a safe and legal maneuver. But the hysterical mom was not buying it, and so Keith finally had to matter-of-factly say, "You're just upset because my boy hurt your boy's feelings." This, for me, was such a great way for John's coach to defend his athlete under his charge. I remember this vividly because one of the records that John also set during his time at Peddie for me personally was for 4 years, through 133 wins and 24 losses, John was never, ever, ever hit for poor sportsmanship. He was always the perfect gentleman in every single situation. So here's, I guess, the crux of it all. An ambitious young kid comes into a school, into the wrestling room with his little notebook with his dreams and his goals. And he has a coach who draws a roadmap for him and shows him how to reach his goals. This same kid goes into the classroom ready to bring it and finds a few teachers who inspire him, and he puts his nose to the grindstone and excels academically as well as in the arts. And in the wrestling room, he learns about how to get the job done. And today, he is an accomplished professional in his field, a great husband, and soon-to-be great dad. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? That's what great schools are supposed to do with young, ambitious people, right? So, John, congratulations on your induction into the Peddie School Sports Hall of Fame, and congratulations to Peddie for recognizing.
Thank you, Coach Tuffy, for this comment. Thank you for those kind words. Appreciate that. I'm not here to talk about myself individually. Accomplishments speak for themselves. However, the idea behind my success at Peddie was the fact that I was able to surround myself with excellence. When I came to Peddie in 1988, correctional, 1988, I came up from Maryland. I'd been wrestling for approximately 4 years, and I was recruited through Baltimore by a coach down there in my junior league program, whose son had attended Peddie as a postgraduate during the 1988 season. After I had wrestled with the program down there in Maryland, I got recruited by Coach Holcomb to come up here to Peddie. And it was probably one of the best decisions of my life. When I came to Peddie, I was pretty wet behind the ears when it comes to
first week was rough. I mean, you know, it's, you go through a transition phase. And, you know, after the first week, I got my feet on everything. And I did make the best of it. However, on the wrestling scene, it was tough. First year when I was there, I won 23 matches, but also lost 17. And that transition, coming from middle school to high school, was very difficult, especially in a ring where you had 2 national prep champions and a national prep runner-up. And what you have to understand on the national prep scale, unlike the public school scale, is the competitiveness in the national prep tournament. The #1 wrestling team in the nation, right now, whether it be public or private school, is Blair Academy. And that says a lot for our prep wrestling program here in New Jersey. The goal every year from our program, when we would wrestle Blair, was to pit our best guys against their best guys. So Blair, who attracts post-grads, as well as Peddie, used to bring their whole PG team and wrestle against us. And a lot of public schools, unfortunately, felt that to be a disadvantage. Coach Holcomb and Coach Duff saw that as a distinct advantage for us as a team, because you wrestle in better talent, you're getting better as such. And being in that ring, wrestling the guys that I was wrestling with, day in and day out, getting my butt kicked, but getting better, mentally, physically, I couldn't ask for any more. My sophomore year, I ended up, you know, as Coach Duff had mentioned, I won 39 matches going up to the national prep tournament. And mentally, I wasn't prepared to go out there and win that championship. I'm physically, you know, conditioning-wise, I was right there. But the problem with the national prep tournament is you have to be ready to go 6 matches, and you have to be there focused the whole time. Unfortunately, myself, I wasn't mentally prepared to do that until my senior year. But through the conditioning and practice that Coach Holcomb put us through, I would put that training on par with any college, with the majority of college programs in the United States. We physically, mentally, conditioning, I would put that on par with pretty much any program. So once again, you know, to me, we surrounded ourselves with excellence. As a student body and other athletic teams, we were surrounded by excellence. You know, Jim Wells over here, who's going to be inducted here in a few short moments. We were classmates. One of the best swimming teams from an era perspective that you could ask for. I mean, you had 4 or 5 future Olympians when we were going to school here. I mean, the bar was set very high. And unfortunately for us, Coach Holcomb and Coach Martin were pretty good friends. And Coach Martin was one of my dorm supervisors when I was living in AC. So if I screwed up in AC, you can be sure that Coach Holcomb heard about it. And I paid for it. But, you know, obviously to make a long story short, I want to say thank you to the faculty and staff here who pushed me academically. Ms. Foote, my freshman year, taught me how to write effectively and efficiently, set me on the right path to, you know, for future life. I mean, as my job right now, I write every day. And coming in there as an individual wet behind the ears, from a writing perspective, I learned how to write. Going to my dorm supervisors, you know, they were there for supervision. You know, being away from home, it was tough, like I said. But it's thank you for all, you know, for that perspective. I want to thank my parents. For providing me with the opportunity to come to Peddie. Thank you. I'd also like to thank my wife for actually letting me come here today. She's unfortunately unable to be with us. She's going to be delivering her first child in about 2 weeks. So the doctor kind of advised against that, but thank you, Jackie, for allowing me to come here to this proceedings today. Thank you, Coach Duffy, for driving up here from Delaware 2.5 hours to present me with this award. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Coach Holcomb for providing me and inspiring me with the tools necessary to not only get through 4 years of wrestling, but to get through life as well. Thank you to the Hall of Fame committee. Thank you for your consideration in this regard. I appreciate that. And once again, thank you, Sue, for your patience during the 4 years. I know I've spent a couple days in the room there. But once again, thank you all for your time and consideration today, and appreciate it.
I'd like to call up Greg Reed, class of 95, to induct Jim Wells. Greg?
Good morning, everybody. As we all know, Peddie swimming has had a pretty grand history over the years. We have put people on national teams, Olympic teams for both USA and different countries around the world. Our team has actually been around longer than Harvard University, as well as 1 year longer than Princeton University. And during that time, we produced many legendary swimmers. But today, I think we're coming together to celebrate one of its finest. The first time I had the privilege to meet Jim was in 2010 at our 100th anniversary celebration. But the first time that I came to know of Jim Wells was 1993, when I walked on campus as a new student. Although it was only a year since graduation for Jim, his accomplishments had already reached a legendary status among the swimmers. My very first meal here at Peddie consisted of a downtown local Chinese delicacy and some stories of the Peddie swimming gods. Now, one particular story grabbed my attention right away. If I can remember it correctly, it revolves around the Peddie and Mercersburg dual meet of either 91 or 92. Mercersburg is in the lead for the 200 medley relay through 3 of the 4 legs. But lo and behold, Jim Wells steps up to the block for the anchor of the 50 free. And being behind by a decent amount, no one really expected them to win. Unfortunately, Jim didn't anticipate that. He splits a 19.7 on the relay. Now, for you, those of you that are not swimmers, okay, this is just ridiculously fast. Ridiculously fast. All right, you want to know how fast? Okay, there may be 3 or 4 high school swimmers across the country every single year from that year on that do that kind of split. But they do it at the end of the season. They're probably rested, shaved down, they got a nice suit on. It's in a deep, fast pool. They do not do it in the middle of the season, tired, all right, in a practice suit, in the old Peddie pool, which you could stand in waist deep. But Jim did. And if this weren't enough to warrant a legendary status, right, what followed in my mind really is. As the story goes, Jim hops out of the pool, looks at the 4 Mercersburg guys, and proceeds to blow them away, one at a time. The 4 dumbfounded Mercersburg swimmers were shocked by this, and Jim walks coolly off the deck to get ready for the next race. Now, whether this actually happened or not, I'm not really sure. But I will tell you that the story had quite a profound effect on a certain new student who decided to recreate a version of that for himself after a win in the 200 IM in the Peddie Mercersburg dual meet of the 93-94 season. We won't name names. All right, but the power of Jim's swimming can really be felt even today. Over the past 20 years, several different swimmers have taken cracks at his records, yet none have fallen. None. A swimmer has been within 1/100th of his 100 freestyle, another swimmer within a quarter second of his 200, and within 2 seconds of his 500. But nothing has been broken. All right, Jim did all these swims in 1 meet. Of all the records on the board, all right, only Nelson Diebel's 100 breaststroke swim and Jim's 100, 200, and 500 times from 1991 would still rank every single year in the top 8 of high school swims in the country. right, for the past 20 years. That to me is impressive. Jim Wells raised the bar for swimming at Peddie and continues to be a measure for all the swimmers to come. He was one of the hardest workers the school has ever known. No one has been able to duplicate his range of ability, right? Because Jim competed at the highest level from the 53 through the 10,000 for time. He challenged one of my swimmers in 2010 to see if he could join the under hour and 40-minute club, because he told us there's only 4 of us in it. See if you can be the 5th. He was champion as an Ironman in training and competition from Olympic coaches such as Chris Martin and Mark Schubert from USC. I believe that speaks volumes about his character because of the men that they were and the places they have gone on to become some of the best coaches in the world for the past 20-odd years. He's held numerous records from Peddie and USC. He's been to the NC2As, the US Olympic Trials. He's represented the USA in international competition. Jim Wells has done it all, and he's done it in grand style. I think we should all congratulate Jim as being one of the greatest Peddie swimming legends and on his induction in the Sports Hall of Fame.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you everyone for this this great time and this induction. It's a big pleasure to be here. I will have to say most of the story Greg told is true. Probably not all of it, but those were great times. At the time, Mercersburg was our big rival. At the end of the day, as I was being recruited by prep schools, it came down to Mercersburg and Peddie. So there obviously was a lot of deep passion for me against Mercersburg. But I guess I'd first like to recognize just members of my family that are here. My father, my sister, my brother-in-law. I'd like to thank, first of all, my family for all their support and allowing me to come here. It was a lot of sacrifice for them. Also like to recognize my wife who's here with us, and 3 little ones who just know me as dad. My 9-year-old Caitlin, my 6-year-old Carter, who's kind of hiding back there, and somebody who's screaming out in the hallway. His name's Jordan, he's being chased around. So it's probably a lot more pleasant for all of us that he's out there. Listen, I came to Peddie. I think I was a pretty good swimmer when I came here, but I was still young and immature, and I think as I looked at those 3 years, they really changed my life. I was surrounded by a lot of great athletes, as John mentioned, in swimming and in other sports. It was a great environment for me. It was 3 of the best years of my life that I was here. Candidly, though, that was also 3 of the more challenging years that I was here. I look back at what we did, in this tiny little pool that used to be there, which I guess is now a fitness center. A little tiny 6-lane pool with 55 swimmers just beating each other up every day in that pool. Chris Martin, who was a coach, was also a mentor figure to me when I was there. I don't know if it could be done in this day and age, but he more or less abused us, right? I mean, we asked for it. We asked for it. I mean, we had practices, they'd be 2-hour practices, they'd morph into 3-hour practices. On Saturday after half-day school, they'd morph into 4-hour practices. But, as you talk to Chris now about it, we loved it, we asked for more, and he just kept stirring the pot and getting more out of us. So, when we competed against teams like Mercersburg, we just had that swagger and that confidence because we knew we had trained harder and we had just done so much more than anybody else that was out there. And it's something I'll never forget. It was 3 great years, and I truly enjoyed it. It's just such a blessing to be around those kinds of people, both academically and athletically. And there were great faculty, there were great mentors. The facilities were good, but wow, as I look around now, what a blessing it is for these current students as well with all the facilities that we have. It's it's great, and I stick my chest out when I tell people I went to Peddie. So, thanks again, everyone, for having me here. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad my family and my kids can be here and see this. This is a great honor. Thank you.
Please welcome Eric Treese, baseball coach, to induct Matt Houston. Treese.
Let me first say what an honor it is to introduce Matt today as he enters the Hall of Fame. A complete rundown of his career and statistics are available in the program, but suffice it to say, his career record of 26-8 with a sub-2 ERA ranks him as probably the most successful pitcher and player in Peddie's long baseball history. Matt was the foundation of a 4-year period of Peddie baseball that ranks as the best in school history. But when thinking back to Matt's time at Peddie, there's one anecdote that always comes to mind for me. Heading into his junior year, in which we would go 22-2, and he would go 10-2, Matt was coming off an injury at the end of his sophomore year, and we had added a few high-profile players over the summer. These new players were receiving a great deal of attention, and I think Matt was feeling a bit forgotten. That spring, we went to Florida for our normal spring training, and in Matt's first start that spring, he goes out and throws a 7-inning, complete game, 2-hit shutout. Now, nobody throws complete games in Florida, either because they're in no shape to do so, or often there's no need. Yet Matt did. The next day, during our second game of the trip, one of our new pitchers was having a decent start, but laboring a bit through 3 innings. I happened to look at Matt in the dugout, and there he was, his arms crossed, sunglasses on, and a little smile on his face. His point had been made. We would not forget who the ace of the staff was ever again. This past winter, Matt joined me to listen to Doug Glanville, who was a former professional baseball player, when he came to speak at Peddie. And Glanville said that one way to judge a high school baseball team was not by who the best player was, but by who the second best player was. After hearing this, Matt hits me in the shoulder, says, "Man, our 2001 team was awesome. Our second best player played in the major leagues and in the World Series." I did not need to ask Matt who our best player was. And he was right. These memories are all Matt to me. There is nothing disingenuous about Matt, and there is no false modesty. He knew he was good. His teammates knew he was good, and every time he took the mound, he wanted the other team to know he was good. "I'm better than you," he said, "and I'm going to prove it." And almost every single time he did. This is what made Matt an extraordinary teammate. His competitiveness, his unwavering confidence, and his toughness. He loved his team, and he gave them everything he had, every single time he pitched. Matt played at a time when Mercer County was full of great pitching. Steiner, Matt's hometown school, with whom Matt had legendary battles, had 3 pitchers drafted. Lawrenceville had a pitcher drafted. Hunn had a pitcher drafted who, as recently as last year, pitched in the majors. But if I had one game to win and could choose anybody from those years, I would take Matt every single time. He simply didn't know how to lose. I consider it one of the great joys of my professional life to have had the chance to be a part of those teams and to watch Matt compete. And I take great pleasure in being able to introduce him today as a member of the Hall of Fame.